Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Elevenses with Lisa. I am Lisa Louise Cooke, and gosh sakes, I'm glad to be here because I got the tech all working. It was touch and go there for a minute, but we are here live. And of course, in the future, many of you will be watching through video replay. But we're glad that you're reaching us and finding us no matter where you are or what time it is for you. Grab your favorite cuppa and settle in for some great genealogy conversation today. We're going to be talking about DNA. And this is a topic we haven't really spent a whole lot of time on so far here at Elevenses with Lisa, but it's about time, don't you think? There's lots of new things happening. And we're happy to be meeting here with our genealogy friends in the live chat. So thankfully, my guest is here live, and he's going to be able to answer some of your questions. And of course, we meet every Thursday at 11 o'clock a.m. Central live. If you can't be here live, you can always join us at genealogygems.com/elevenses. Or you can always watch the replay on YouTube, but it's kind of better over at our website because we've got the show notes for you as well. I am delighted to say that my guest today is Rand Snir, and he is the Director of Product Management for DNA over at MyHeritage. And if you listen to the Genealogy Gems podcast, then you've heard him on that show. And if you are a premium member, then you've had an opportunity to watch his terrific video. It's called How to Get the Most Out of Your MyHeritage DNA Test Results. Well, today we're going to kind of expand on that topic, okay? And talk about where MyHeritage has been in terms of their ethnicity estimates, and then talk about how they built this new tool, which is genetic groups. And of course, Rand has been instrumental in that. And then he's going to just jump us into the user interface and show us some very cool examples of genetic groups in the works. So without further ado, let's go. Hi, Rand. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much.
I am so glad you're here. We can hear each other. That was the big little scare this morning, but you are such a trooper. And I have to say, I think the last time that you and I saw each other in person was at Roots Tech, right?
I believe so. Yeah. Almost a year ago.
Seems like ages ago. Oh my gosh. And I know you have been very, very busy since then. It never stops, does it?
No, but we like it that way, so no complaints.
That's right. And you're coming to us live from Israel. So what time of day is it and what's it like outside?
So it's now 7 p.m., 7:05, and a bit rainy, but not too bad. Winter-ish, Israeli winter.
Great. Well, I'm excited to talk to you about genetic groups because this is a brand new tool. I know it just came out. And I think we should probably start at the beginning, which is what has ethnicity estimates look like over at MyHeritage before genetic groups came along?
Yeah. So we're really excited about this latest release. We launched it, we pushed it out on Christmas Day, end of December. And this is something that's been in the works for many, many years, to be honest, 2.5 or 3 years since we initially started working on that. A lot of people at MyHeritage had been working on that and still are. And we're so excited about that. And if we're ready, I'll just jump right into my presentation and we can talk a little bit more in detail.
Yes, I'd love to see it. Go for it.
Sounds good. So let me just share my screen and let me know if you can see what I'm presenting.
I can see it.
All right.
Excellent.
Perfect. So we're going to start with talking a little bit about the background, which is what you raised, what was there up until we had genetic groups till recently. We're going to talk about the behind the scenes, how we create the genetic groups. And eventually, that's why I assume most of us are here for, we're going to actually see some genetic groups and talk about them.
Yeah.
So let's start. All right, so the background. So ethnicity estimate, I'll start with the very beginning because probably some are not too familiar with terms and we'll just explain. So ethnicity estimate as a whole, as a term, is what we like to call the architecture of genome variation between populations. And basically it's our attempt to tell you where your ancestors came from to break down the world into different ethnicities and tell you how much you inherited of those. And I'll explain with an example. Let's start with an example. I have Mike here, who I've been using for the past 4 years, I'm sorry. Never disappointed me. Look at his maternal side. So we're looking at his great-grandparents. And let's assume for a second, I know that with ethnicity we have names and we call them in different ways, but let's use colors because that's the easiest, I think, to understand how this works. And let's assume that all of his great-grandparents on his maternal side are of the purple ethnicity, all right? Well, if that's the case, because we inherit roughly 50% from each one of our parents, his grandparents will also be purple, so is his mom, and he's going to end up being 50% purple. When we're looking at the paternal side, things are a little bit more mixed. And here we're looking at the great-grandparents, and let's say the two of them are orange, and then the other two, one is red and one is blue. So when we're looking at the grandparents, we see that something here is happening. So we can see that his grandmother on the paternal side is orange because both of our parents were orange. But when we're looking at the grandparent, we see that he's mixed now. He's 50% blue and 50% red. And when we're looking at his father, it's narrowing down. Now it's broken down even more. And his father is 25% red, 25% blue, and 50% orange, which Mike ends up being 50% purple, 25% orange, 12.5 of blue and red. And this is kind of how genetics is passed down in generations. And that's what we were doing with ethnicity estimate. We were trying to look and separate. We ran a founder population project. We need a good reference set so that we can name those colors and say, for example, that purple is Scandinavia, or that orange is Ashkenazi Jewish, for example. So we ran a big project and we found good candidates based on the people we have on MyHeritage. We built very large trees going many generations back. And we found people who have lived in the same place and stayed there for many generations and probably and didn't migrate much. And we sent them DNA kits and we looked at their genetic data and we were trying to isolate or to find unique genetic characteristics so that we can point and say, this is how Scandinavian ethnicity looks like. This is what's common to all of the people that we've tested. And we try doing that with many, 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 many different potential ethnicities, let's say, or candidates for potential ethnicities.
That's really interesting, Rand, because a lot of people think, oh, it's only limited to whoever's tested, bought a kit, through retail. But you go out and you proactively look for these groups to include them. Is that right?
That's how we started. So when we wanted to do our ethnicity estimate model, we were trying to have as broad as possible or as biggest pool as possible of different ethnicities so that we can provide our customers and users with interesting information and data points.
Exactly.
But for that, we really need to be able, for our algorithms to work properly, we need to be able to differentiate and say, this looks like an Ashkenazi Jewish and this looks like a Scandinavian, for example.
Great.
So when we're taking enough people and we're letting the algorithms do the work for us and that we set and tune, we then are able to find those unique characteristics and say, this is how this segment on this chromosome or this specific SNP, a genetic marker position on the chromosome, is very repetitive within this group of people who have all roots in this place. And that's how we were kind of try to build it. And when we did that, we ended up with 42 different regions. So this is the pool that we have for ethnicity estimate. And when you test with MyHeritage DNA, or if you've taken a test with another service, it is also possible to upload that to MyHeritage. We are then running your genetic data against those algorithms that we put in place and defined based on the work done years ago, and trying to say that you're X% that and Y% that of the 42 that we have. We're trying to look for those genetic characteristics and tell you how much, what percentage you have of them in your personal genetic data, and that's how we break down your ethnicity estimate.
And you just touched on that you can, if you have tested with another company. I know Debbie was asking in chat about if she tested with Ancestry. She could upload her raw data to MyHeritage, right? And then be a part of this.
Yes, that is possible. So you can upload to MyHeritage. You can go right now to myheritagedna.com/upload. And there's a very intuitive UI there, user interface, I'm sorry, that will allow you to take the DNA data file, the raw DNA data file from the service you have tested with, whether it's Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, and upload that to MyHeritage, and we will be able to provide you with your results. I will say that some of the features we have come for free, for example, your list of DNA matches, and the ethnicity estimate requires a small one-time fee in order to unlock this. All right.
Right. Great.
So we ended up with these 42 ethnicities, which you can look now on the screen. We still didn't get to genetic groups yet, but stay tuned. We're getting there right now. And these are the 42 we were able to come up with. And when we released that, and this is how results looked like on MyHeritage up till December 24th. So you can see your results here from different areas around the world. We have pretty good coverage for these 42, and your ethnicity, which sums up to 100% always, we're all 100%. You can see which ethnicities you have in your genetic data, what we were able to identify for you. But we knew we wanted something more. So we had 42 of these, and we wanted to provide our users and customers with something else. We wanted to provide higher resolution. For example, we can tell you that you have X% of Scandinavian ethnicity in your results. But Scandinavia is big. It consists of different countries. And when we're trying to look for example, in the Scandinavia case, when we're trying to look for special characteristics that will help us differentiate, for example, between Danish people and Swedish people, it was too difficult. The genetics looked just too similar, and it was really problematic to separate them based on the technologies and algorithms that we had in place for the ethnicity estimate. Also, what we wanted to do, so that's high resolution, right? To give you something much more detailed than just saying Scandinavian. Maybe we can tell you Denmark, and maybe we can tell you a specific city in Denmark. That's what we had in mind when we started long ago, and soon you'll see what we ended up with. We also knew that because that genetics are, the differences sometimes are not significant enough, ethnicities tend to mix up. So there are ethnicities that look very similar to one another, and we sometimes make mistakes, and instead of allocate, for example, we have an English ethnicity and a Scottish, Irish, and Welsh ethnicity. And even that we were able to break down those into two groups, we still sometimes see that there are some mismatches, and people who should have been allocated completely to the Irish, Scottish, and Welsh side still get some English and vice versa. So that's kind of the downside of the technology we're using for the ethnicity estimate we spoke about. So we knew we need to use a different approach, try something else. And this is what we did with genetic groups. So internally, we're calling it the Worldwide DNA Web, and I'll explain what that is. So let's look, for example, on a person. He's taken a DNA test with MyHeritage, and he has his results on MyHeritage, and now we're looking at his DNA matches. I think that's the first time I'm using this term. And then let's look at the matches of his DNA matches. And we can start building these networks, right? We can start seeing that this person is connected to that person, and that person is connected to this person. And we can probably start connecting the dots and start breaking them down into different clusters, groups. And when the network is really tiny, right, when there are not a lot of people connected, that's probably a family, right? We see what you call a close family connected together, and that doesn't really tell a story about ethnicity or backgrounds or ancestors. And if that rings a bell, that's because those of you who are on MyHeritage and might have used the auto clusters feature we have, this is something we released 2 years ago at Rootstack, celebrating 2 years this month. Auto clusters is a feature we worked on that takes all of your DNA matches and just trying to run these combinations between your DNA matches and seeing who's connected to who. And it's breaking them down into those groups, clusters that you can look at. And pretty much there's it's a topic for, we can talk about it in a whole different session. But basically what this does is that it groups your DNA matches together into clusters, which have descended from one ancestor or a couple of ancestors. So you can now look at your DNA matches in a different view, and that helps you kind of sort out or look at your DNA matches in a different way. And this is all happening automatically behind the scenes. You just press a button and you get this. But you can now look at those groups of DNA matches with our like 15 or 20 in each one of these groups, sometimes less. And you get hints, you know how to start. So because the orange are not related enough to the red, we can separate them and say this is coming from one branch of the family, one branch of the tree, and this one from another, coming from different ancestors. And it's very much similar to what we're doing with genetic groups. Now remember the slide I showed just a minute or two ago of a small tiny family connected together? That was this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take all of the DNA matches on MyHeritage, all of the kits that we have, which is more than 4.7 million. And now try connecting all the dots. Okay, so no screen on Earth is able to show you that. So take that as kind of like a point on that huge graph of where we're taking all of the DNA kits we have and all of the DNA matches between them, and we're trying to see who's connected to who. And you can end up with something that looks like this net, this worldwide DNA net, web. So each point here is a DNA kit, and it's connected with a line to other DNA kits, and these are the DNA matches. And we're talking billions of matches. And if you look, you can see that there are some clusters. You can see that while in some of the cases there is a lot of noise and everyone's connected to everyone, in some of the cases the clusters are very isolated. I hope you can see that I highlighted some of them here, just to show that in some of the cases we can connect kits together and they create a group. So when we ran the algorithm originally, we used 1.7 million MyHeritage users, kits assigned to MyHeritage users, which resulted in almost 11 billion DNA matches, connected everyone to everyone, and we ended up with thousands of clusters, similar to the ones I show here. So we're talking thousands, and we had to start. So how did we start? So we took a cluster. Everything is both manual and automatically out, obviously. And we looked at the family tree associated with these DNA kits. We went to the trees, because everything's in the trees. All the goodies are in the family trees. And for each family tree, we tried looking at events. What happened there? Looking at ancestral events, birth events, death events, places, times. What can we take, like when we look at the data aggregated of all of the people who contributed to the formation of this cluster, what data do we have so that we can tell a story? Is there a story here to tell about all these groups who have formed this genetic group? We're talking here about one, think thousands. So we looked at the ancestral events, as I said, and we looked at common surnames, because sometimes that can hint a lot and tell a story about a group of people. We looked at migration events. People moved from one place to another in a specific time period. Whether there are distinct migration events from the same source going to different places. The ethnicities in the group, which I explained before. Sometimes we see a lot of people who have all lived in the same country. We see that we ended up with two genetic groups. The places remain the same, but the ethnicities are different. That's because these are two different ethnical groups living at the same place and the same time. But we should obviously separate them. They tell a different story. These are not the same people. And we looked at geographical overlap and see if some groups are related to others. And what we really want to do is to tell a story. We were trying to look at all of these data points and see if we can tell a story about a group of people who lived here in a specific time period, stayed there, moved, stayed and moved, all kind of things that can happen. And that was most of the work that we have been doing on the thousands of clusters we ended up with. And some examples before we jump to the user interface to see what we are today offering our users. But when we worked on it about a year and a half ago, this is, for example, genetic group 396, a random one that came out when we ran our algorithms. And we're looking at a specific time period. Now, those who have tested with MyHeritage, there is an ethnicity called Finnish. We do know to recognize people from Finnish background, but everyone was Finnish. Doesn't matter where your ancestors came from in Finland. And when we looked at the data from the trees of the people who clustered together, who created this genetic group, you can see that the events are very specific. It points to a specific place in Finland, District 12, for example. On MyHeritage, we have an ethnicity called North and Western European, which is a huge area geographically. It covers 5 or 6 countries, different backgrounds, different people. But unfortunately, genetically, when we tried building different models to break them down, when we did our ethnicity estimate, we weren't able to do that. The genetics look just too similar. But using this method of how we build genetic groups, you can see that now they're grouping and the events are taking place in different places. So not only that today I can tell someone who's North and Western European, not only that you're from Austria, you're from the northern part of Austria, okay? If you ended up in the genetic group that's colored in purple here. And time played a huge role here, right? We can't just look at all of the events, at all of, like, from all of the trees, all of it, like it as one set of data. We need to look at them broken down by years. So this is, for example, another group, 131, mostly North and Western European. And I hope that you can see the animation running on the right. But we're looking now at the ancestral events of the people who ended up forming this genetic group and how they moved. So they started in the 1700s in Germany, and they moved towards Russia, or the Russian Empire, and stayed there. And around 1900, 1950, they spread all around the area. And when we looked again at the surnames and all of the information, what is the story that we can tell here, we see that these are a group that we call the Volga Germans. There are about 600,000 of them today still living in Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. They have their own culture. They keep their own language, tradition, have very unique surnames. And they were invited in the late 18th century to come and establish farming settlements in the Volga region from Germany to Russia. And during World War II, about 1 million of them were forced to exile in the Soviet Union, and that's how they spread. So if I go back now, so obviously we don't see it here from the data, and the animation is really nice, but looking at all of the data points that we have, which included surnames and ethnicity and ancestral events in different time periods, we were able to spot and say that these are the Volga Germans. We can now tell people, if we see that they match this genetic group, that they have ancestral events linking them to the Volga Germans, which is great. This is the highest, this is the best resolution I think you can tell someone. This is a great story to tell someone. And after we did all of this, we ended up with 2,114 different genetic groups in different geographic regions. Sometimes they tell a story of people who lived in one place and stayed there. Sometimes these are settlers moving between continents, countries, start new, move to the new world. And sometimes these are mixed stories of different groups who have come together and started a new story, a new life story. And for those 2,000, we were able to find the unique characteristic, the genetic characteristics that identify each one of them, mostly using how we built it originally. And now when we're getting your DNA data, we can also tell you your ethnicity estimate, which is something that I spoke about in the beginning, and also tell you, what do we see, where do you see that you're a member of which genetic groups out of these 2,000 that we have. And sometimes the results are simply amazing and tell a very narrowed down story of an ancestor you have. And that's pretty much for the presentation. And I think that we're ready to look at the actual user interface and what users see.
Yeah. That would be great, because I think people are, they're excited in the chat and talking. Can I ask you a couple quick questions before you jump into the interface?
Yes, absolutely.
So one of the questions was the animation was really cool, and people wanted to know who has access to users. Does it depend if you uploaded your data versus what you tested with MyHeritage? Who can use and look at those kinds of animations for their own backgrounds.
So the animation, what I showed before in the slides, and I assume that we're talking about this
Yes.
one, where how throughout the year we see the change. Stay tuned. I'm going to show you how it ended up looking at the actual product. These are internal tools that our science team and our development team and product, when we worked on that, we needed something that's not, I think we ended up with something a bit nicer, but that's a couple of minutes.
Awesome. So you'll show us that, but it's so wonderful because, like you said, it's really showing the story. It's showing the movement, and that just brings it to life, doesn't it?
I believe so, and I think that also that's like we learned that. I'm going to be honest. So this is a really long project. Okay, usually things we work on don't last 3 years, but it's been such fun because, first of all, I learned tons of genealogy and history, geography, and more than I can imagine. And second, when you look at the data, it gives us a way to look at the history and the data we have in a different angle, because looking at it on a timeline really tells an interesting story. And we'll get to that. As for the question that you asked, if you have purchased the MyHeritage DNA kit, this comes along with the kit. You don't have to pay anything extra.
Okay.
If you have tested with another vendor, such as the ones I mentioned before, and you want to upload your DNA data to MyHeritage, the upload is free. You're going to get your list of DNA matches for free. The access to look at your ethnicity estimate and your genetic groups will cost a one-time small additional fee.
Okay.
Not additional, a one-time fee. That's the only fee.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
And also, there were a couple of questions. When you get results like this, and there just seems to be a huge discrepancy, what causes some of the discrepancies? Like you think that you and your mom are going to have all this shared, but you don't have hardly any, or you have matches, but it can't tell you where the ethnicity is. What are some of the variables people might run into that at this point in time, that's just what it is? I don't know if I'm asking that question right, but I know a lot of times people will say things that they just don't expect. What could cause results you don't expect?
So I'll separate that too, if that's fine. And one, I'll talk about the ethnicity estimates, which are the percentage base that I spoke about in the beginning, and genetic groups. So ethnicity estimate, there are cases in which a person will get a certain ethnicity in his results, and the percentage plays a role here. And when he's testing both of his parents, sometimes they won't appear, or they will appear with a different amount of percent, like with different percentages lower than what they had. Now, obviously, that there are no good explanation to what that can happen. In most of the cases, either what you get in the lowest percentages could be statistical errors. All right, these should have been allocated to a different ethnicity, and sometimes, as I mentioned with the English and Irish, Scottish, and Welsh example, they tend to mix, and we know that this is an area we need to improve in. And the good news is that now the genetic groups is out. This is our focus, and we're building ethnicity estimate. Genetic groups really helped us in a way to see also some of the flaws we have in the ethnicity estimate calculations. The things you mentioned, ethnicities that mix up, child-only ethnicities, we call them, when none of your parents receive the same results as you. It doesn't happen a lot, but there are some cases, and there are some specific ethnicities when we see that they tend to mix more. And genetic groups helped us surface that and see it in better eyes, I'd say. And this is something we're working on now. We're rebuilding ethnicity estimate, the first part I spoke about, from scratch, using new technology. It's a little bit early to talk about what we're actually going to see there. And it's planned for, we're planning that for 2021 down the line. Awesome. And stay tuned. So far, the things we see are pretty cool, but I don't want to set expectations too high. And we need to save something for another session, right?
That's right. So
as for genetic groups, they don't tend, because of the way that they're built, as I explained with the clustering and the matches, they tend to, this phenomenons we spoke about just now, we don't see them so much as we've seen with the ethnicity estimate. I hope that's clear enough.
Yeah. And one last question. I know you're going to show us what it really looks like in the user interface. I saw a very good question that I think is real simple, which is Sally is asking, would we get more detailed genetic group information if we put our family tree on MyHeritage? Some people might test, but they haven't put their tree on there. Does that help the user, and does that help you to create better groups?
So, yes, the answer is yes to both, and I'll explain. Why is it good to have your family tree on MyHeritage? First of all, it will help you a lot when you're working with your DNA matches, because we have, and again, we can do like 50 different sessions, Lisa. We should schedule that. But we have so many tools that we give our users when working with their DNA matches that are take into consideration your personal family trees and the other side family trees, and we're automatically looking for shared surnames and common ancestral places and theory of family relativity, which is our way of automatically finding the connection between you and another person, and other good things that exist there. So that's why it's valuable for you personally. For us, yes, definitely, because as I explained, this helped us build those genetic groups. Imagine, for example, that all of this presentation I would have shown you of DNA kits not associated to any family trees. So we just saw people clustering together without any clue what to say about them, where their ancestors came from, what's the story to tell. So definitely the reason that I think we ended up with the successful feature and with the ability to tell good stories is because of the data that we have from our users, who have pretty much contributed to the development of this pretty well, it's more than I have. So without you, it wouldn't have been possible. So definitely helps us. And as much detail as we have, as many generations back the information goes, the data goes, the better genetic groups that we can build.
Wonderful. Well, let's take a look. You said you'd show us live in the interface. We'd love to see it.
All right. So if we're ready, let's jump right in. So this is how the new ethnicity estimate looks like on MyHeritage. I'm using a Jane Smith. I changed the name, but these are real results. And you can see right here, so the ethnicity estimate are the one mentioned with percentages. So you can see that Jane here has 38.7% Iberian ethnicity. And up till December, that's all we're able to tell her. So Iberian, which is a peninsula in the western south of Europe, western side of Europe, which covers Spain and Portugal, and many countries around the world. Many of the people living around the world today have ancestors who have originated from this peninsula, from this area. And now looking at Jane's results, we can see that we're indicating to her that she has genetic groups in Portugal, in the island of Azores and Madeira, which are right here in the ocean. If you hover over each one of these, you will see, I hope that you can see it when I'm sharing the screen, but you can see the polygon on the map kind of flashes or highlighted so that it's easier for you to track and see what's going on. What I didn't say in my presentation is that unlike ethnicity estimate, which sums up to 100% and each ethnicity comes with a percentage, the genetic groups are just there, whether you have it or not, with a tiny exception. So we didn't want to going into percentages because it doesn't sum up to 100. Someone might have 5, 6, 7. Some people have 20. But we can say how confident we are in what we're giving you. Sometimes we see a strong genetic resemblance to the characteristic of this genetic group, and then we'll put it on the high. This is the confidence level you see right here. Can you see my cursor when I move it?
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. So this is the high. We're currently standing on medium. And if I go to low, we can see the map zooms out, and now I see more genetic groups. Now, these are genetic groups that we were able to find for Jane, but we might be wrong. So the genetic connections are not strong enough for us to really say we're sure that this comes from your side, that this is really there. We see indications, but we can't be sure. So I'm jumping back to medium, and now we're looking at the medium and high. And for example, we can see here, so again, we've got Portugal, Azores, and I'll talk about the number here in a second, and Madeira. And why do we have two groups for Azores, 1 and 6? So remember that we build those clusters of DNA matches grouping together? Well, that means that we ended up with two genetic groups that when we looked at the information, we couldn't tell a different story. We couldn't give it a different name. We see that these are people coming from the Azores Island, which is part of Portugal. The ancestors are there, but they're separate. They're not connected enough, either different families in the past or something else. But there's a distinction here. Sometimes we will be able to see that in the description of the group. Maybe they've migrated to different places. Maybe these are different families living on different sides of the island. But we couldn't tell something that's more unique, so we decided to just number them and tell you that we see links both to this and that. Let's see, before we deep dive into genetic groups even more, so we can see here 4 groups under the Iberian ethnicity. We see that Jane has 21% or almost 22% of the Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. And we were able to tell her that we see a genetic group in Ireland, in Mayo, Galway, and these 2 other districts or regions in Ireland. So up till a month ago, we gave Jane a pretty big geographic region that we're telling her we see your ancestry coming from there, coming from this area, or that you have ties from this place. And now we can narrow it down to 4 specific districts in Ireland that you can see highlighted on the map. You can also highlight from here if you prefer. So both the map and the list right here are interactive, and you can use them.
We love that. That's really cool.
Thank you. So we see here genetic groups nested under different ethnicities. But in some of the cases, there are groups that are not specific to one ethnicity. They can be a result of 2 ethnicities coming together in some place around the world, or the results are just not unique enough. We can't say that this group is related to this specific ethnicity. It has more than that, or your results don't show that. And in such case, we have additional genetic groups. That's a section right here at the bottom. So don't forget to check that. And we can see that we also gave Jane UK and Ireland and another group in Azores that's probably either mixed with different ethnicities or just doesn't match Jane's personal results. So it can be both here or there. So before we jump into genetic groups, let's see how an ethnicity page looks like now. So I clicked on the Iberian, and the map zoomed in automatically, and we can see the genetic groups that Jane has along with their description. So for example, the Portugal Madeira one is a Portuguese in Portugal Madeira, and their descendants in the United States and some in Guyana and Brazil. And we're going to look at this group in a second because it has an interesting story to tell. And again, many of the groups, as you can imagine, have descendants in Brazil originating from Portugal. That makes sense. On the About This Ethnicity section, you can read a little bit more and read what's the story behind this group and listen to a fine tune. I won't play it now because it would probably be too loud, but it's really cool. We created 42 different tunes for each ethnicity to kind of spice things up and give it some an additional twist. And you can see your DNA matches with whom you share the same ethnicity. So these are Jane's DNA matches. But we came here to look at genetic groups. So let's choose the Portugal Madeira one. And when I click on the group, now we're actually looking at the information that we have to show. So I'll explain one by one what we're seeing here. So first of all, we'll show the name of the group right here at the top left with its ID. And we're telling you a description, because sometimes the names will be very similar, but in the description, you can find what makes this group unique, for example. So as we saw before, these are Portuguese in Portugal Madeira, and their descendants in the United States and some in Guyana and Brazil. We can see how many DNA kits were used to form this group, which in this case are 109 groups. We like to share information. We know our audience. We know genealogists love to look at data and numbers. So we're sharing everything we have. And in this case, we can see, remember, we took those 1.7 billion kits with matches and all of these things, and we're trying to look at the information. So 109 DNA kits help to form this group. Out of these 109, we have 47 which are linked to family trees. So about half of them are not linked to family trees, following the question that you asked before. Yeah. So we can see that there are DNA matches. We can see a cluster. We can see a group of people connected to one another. But only 47 people here have helped us with their family trees to tell the story and really say, this is Portugal, this is Madeira, it goes back this amount of time. what are the top places for each time period. I hope you can see this nice timeline. The Zoom is playing tricks on me. Let me see. You probably don't see it on your screen, but I move it here. All right. So we can see a group timeline, and we can see what time period I'm now standing on, which is 1900 to 1950. So we're taking those ancestral events that we had to build this group, and we're telling a story. We're showing using a heat map, what you see on the map right now, of like where these people live in that time period of that genetic group. So we're looking at 1900 to 1950, and we can see some people have been living in Portugal. If you over Portugal right here, I clicked it. You can also see that 27 trees out of the 47 we have ancestral events in Portugal during this time period. And you can see exactly where. So in Madeira, in Funchal or Funchal, I hope that I'm pronouncing it right. And some have lived in Porto, in Portugal. We also have people living in the United States belonging to this group in this point of time. And if I'll click on that, I can see that they're mostly in California, Iowa, and Massachusetts. And the specific cities if we have information to share. And some are also in Guyana. Let's see what else we can give you about the group. So we're showing you common surnames. Rodriguez, Ferreira, Fernandez, Gomez. These names make sense for a group coming from the Iberian Peninsula, from Portugal. And we're also showing you common given names. So these are names that we've seen in the trees, right? Of people who lived there during this time period and other time periods. And we're telling you what is the common ethnicity. Sometimes you'll see people living, for example, in Germany, but some will be from the North and Western European ethnicity. Some will be from Balkan ethnicity, for example. And they lived in Germany at the same time. So the ethnicities, the common ethnicities that have helped us to form the groups are very helpful when we're looking at this. In this specific group, these are all Iberian, as we saw in the data. And last but not least, we're showing related groups. So remember that that DNA web that I showed of people connected to one another, and we saw those isolated groups? Sometimes we do see that there's a link. The link is not strong enough so that we'll unify those two clusters or groups into one, and we decided to keep them separate because it was the right decision to make in our opinion, but we see that there are strong links between those genetic groups, and this is what you'll see here. All right, so we looked at 1900 to 1950, but there's a whole story to tell, and I can go and jump between each one of the time periods we have here in the timeline. This is interactive. So I can go and look, for example, what happened in the 1800 to 1850, and the map will refresh to show me where people have lived now. I can go back in time. So now we can see events only in Spain, Madeira, and starting to form in the Rio de Janeiro area in Brazil. And I can jump back to this period. But what I really like, and I think that you're going to like, and someone had asked, is this play timeline animation. So when I click on that, what will happen is that the timeline is going to go back to the start and will show you the story without doing anything. So let's do that. So now we're at the 1600 to 1650, and we're in Portugal, mostly in Portugal and Madeira. And you can see how people are moving. And when we're getting to the 1750, we're going back and we're starting to see events in Brazil, and now in the States, and now in Guyana. And you can see the story that this genetic group had to tell or has to tell in different time throughout history, in the past 400 years or even more than that in this case. So we have a lot of information to show, and you can look at the animation, and again, you can jump and look at any time period that you find interesting. And the section right here with the top places will update as you move. So when I'm in the 1750 to 1800, I have events in Portugal and Brazil. But when I'm jumping to the 1900s, we see that United States joins in. So people have moved to the United States in between that time period. And we can learn more about the story of the people from Portugal, Madeira, and how they started over there in Portugal and moved around. Let's look at another example. This one I like. This is the story of the Mormons in Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and in New Mexico. And we're starting again with the 1900 to 1950. You can see the places where most of them had lived during that time period. So that's United States in 1900 to 1950. That's the strongest. Most of them have already moved to the United States. But let's play the timeline animation and see how the story started. We're going to the 1600, and we see many of them are living in England and are starting to move to the eastern coast of the USA. And we're in the 1750 to 1800, and they're still in the eastern coast, and now they're starting to move to the west. 1850, we see more people on the west side ending up living in the Utah area and the Colorado. So when we look at the story, I hope that it comes well with the screen share. But you can see really the story and how people moved between different places throughout from the 1600s, where they started to live. Most of them were living in England, and how they gradually migrated to the eastern coast of the US, and then gradually moving to the west throughout the centuries. And again, showing the common surnames for this group and where they're currently living now, giving you the states and the specific cities or region or counties when we have them, to tell a bit more.
That level of detail is amazing. And of course, my question is, I'm looking at this going, I wonder if we can we download this animation? And even better, how about the music with it?
So the music, we have the tunes for the 42 ethnicities. I'll tell you what, Lisa, if you're free enough time and sit with me on compiling 2,115 unique tunes, I'm all up for it. The suggestion to download the animation is really cool. We're trying to think of the best way how to do that.
Yeah, that'd be really fun thing to share with other family members, particularly those not so interested in genealogy. That would really excite them, I would think.
Yeah, I think so too. And by the way, when we released December, we didn't have the play and the animation yet in the timeline. We haven't stopped.
Yeah.
So we released December and we kept on working. The animation was, now it's February, doesn't make sense of time, but like mid-January, the timeline went out with the option to play the animation. And we're constantly thinking of different ways on how to improve the user experience and the joyful that this brings to our users. And there are more things coming down the line. So stay tuned for that.
That is fantastic. Let me look and see. So do you have other ones, or should I look and see if there's any last minute questions?
What else did I prepare? This is a cool example. So I spoke about it in the beginning of my presentation. I'm looking at 1600 to 1650 now of a group that's called Norway Hersted. So remember I said we were able to say Scandinavian, and that's it. That's what we were able to tell people, which covers this entire area pretty much all here. So Jane, for example, that used to get, I'm looking at, there's one more thing. Actually, thanks. One more thing I wanted to show, so I'll get to that in a second. You have your own results, right? You'll get in between 1 to 2 to 3 to as many genetic groups as you have. But there's an option to look at all of the 2,114. I haven't shown that, so I'll do that in a second. That's the mode I'm currently in. So if Jane, for example, was Scandinavian, and up till now we're able to tell her that she's 25% Scandinavian, we were able to narrow it down to Norway, and not only Norway, but specific this region, Harstad, in the northern part of Norway. Which you can see here, and the timeline animation shows that pretty nicely. You can see that the majority of the people in this group, almost in almost all of the cases, we have people living in the capital, but you can see that the majority of the people are living up here in the north, and the rest are spread in different areas around Norway and immigrations around the world. So just to cap on that view all, when you're at your own results, I'm coming back to the main screen. This is how we started. By the way, if you move the map, you get a bit confused, you're not sure where you are, we have this globe icon right here, which you can click, which will reset you back to wherever you started from, and pretty useful. If you scroll down to the end of your own results, there's an option here to show all available regions. And when you click on that, you will see all of the ethnicities and the genetic groups that we have. So you can see we have 42 ethnicities today, with 2,114. And for example, I don't have any Finnish in my ethnicity, in Jane's case, but we were able to find 54 genetic groups from Finland. And if I'll drill down to Finland and I look at this area, they will all be listed here. And I can hover over them as I go by. and you can see where they are. And for each one of them, I can go inside to look at more data and see more where people have lived and read more the common names, the common surnames, the common given names, the ethnicities, and the places where these people had lived in different time periods. So all of the genetic groups are available to you to view. So we're giving you your results, and if you're interested, and genealogists are never interested in reviewing more information, I know that, but you can drill down and look at all of the 2,000 we have. So yeah.
That's fantastic. I think it's terrific the way you guys are sharing the data and the information, because I think one of the things that people, particularly if they're just dabbling, they think of it as a static thing, but there's nothing static about this, is there? It's a constantly evolving. The more data you get, then the more you can refine. I'm assuming that that's just an ongoing process, is it not?
It is. And when I started, well, because it was such a long journey to get genetic groups out, when we started with 1.7 million kids. That's what we had in the database when we started working on this. To date, we have more than 4 million. And we used the extra 2 million at some point to validate our results and to fine tune the names and add more data and fix some of the things and merge some genetic groups that were similar and add new ones. And as more people test and as more people add additional information to their family trees, we are able also to fine tune the names and fine tune the descriptions and also come up with new ones. So yeah,
Wow.
It's a never process.
Now, Nancy's saying that I think it was Nancy said, no, or Leanne, she says she's not seeing the timeline at the bottom of the page. Can you recap again for us? I assume based on whether you tested directly with MyHeritage, whether you uploaded, and whether you bought the upgrade once you uploaded, you may or may not be seeing all of the tools. Can you recap that again for us in case somebody's not seeing this, but they would like to figure out how to be able to get access to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nancy, is that?
I think it was Leanne actually who asked about that.
Yeah. All right. So there are two types of results, as I mentioned. There's an ethnicity estimate and a genetic group. If you are clicking, these are your DNA, this is your DNA results section on MyHeritage. It's accessible from the DNA navigation bar. Mm-hmm. And you can go directly to ethnicity estimate, which will show you your ethnicity estimates and genetic groups. If you are clicking on ethnicity estimate and you're seeing this map, you're good to go. There's nothing else to do. If you have uploaded a DNA data file and we are requesting the one-time fee, you will see here a button that tells you that to unlock your ethnicity estimate and genetic groups, you need to pay. So what I think happened with the question that was raised, keep in mind that we have two types of results. We have the ethnicity, which is Iberian, for example, in this case. And for Iberian, this is an ethnicity we don't show a timeline, as you can see here. Mm-hmm. And there are no common surnames and places. This is like the percentage-based ethnicity, the old model that we're using to break down your ethnicity. And when you're going down into a genetic group, that's when you'll see the top places, the surnames, and the timeline. So I think that's the source of confusion.
That's perfect. And one last question I saw, a couple of people say that they have their family tree on MyHeritage and they're really enjoying being able to look at this. But let's say that their brother or their sister has tested. Can they upload their results to share it on the same account? How does that work when you're in a family and multiple people are testing?
So on MyHeritage, we do allow you to manage DNA kits for your family member, and you can manage them under my account. I don't think I'm logged into my personal one because I prefer this, but you don't want to look at mine. Okay, so this is like.
And you don't want us to upload ours to yours, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there are so many people I'm managing their DNA kits from, and they have the option. I have the option to see it. So yes, you can manage your family members' DNA data files on MyHeritage, whether they've tested with us, with others. There are options to do that, and yeah.
That's fantastic. Gosh, I can't believe this hour is almost gone. I just want to thank you so much for introducing us to this. We're so fortunate to have you. You're the guy, behind all of this. And it's exciting to see the innovations. And I really am so impressed at the way you guys just continually kind of try to think outside the box. How can we bring a new feature or make this more meaningful? And like you said, to tell the story. So I appreciate it, Rand Snir. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Those of you who are with us, hope this brings joy to you. Those who are not yet, we'll welcome you. Join the family, and more to come. And almost happy birthday, Lisa.
Thank you, Rand. And I can't wait till we get to see each other again in person. All the best, my friend.
Yes, please. I hope it won't take as long as it took this time.
Exactly. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
All right. Thank you all.
Boy, he's just a fountain of knowledge, is he not? And I think that these tools are just fascinating in their continued evolution. I know you guys had a lot of questions, so don't worry. We have been tracking them all in the live chat, and we'll be compiling those and figuring out what applies on this particular presentation, and maybe ask Rand to answer a couple of those for us on the show notes. So just stay tuned for that. So somebody asked, okay, my brain's about ready to explode. How do I watch this again? You can absolutely watch it again. Those of you watching right now, this very minute on Thursday the 4th, are watching live. But as soon as we wrap this up, then it will save as a video. And the video will be available right here at our YouTube channel. So that's youtube.com/genealogygems. So you can always rest assured that you'll get it there. But here's the easiest way to make sure you get to watch the video replay and you get to watch or get to read the notes on our website is to sign up for our free newsletter, because each week on Wednesday, I will email you. I will let you know what's the next show coming up, and the link and the information on the one we just wrapped, which is the one today, and how to go and read all the notes there on our website, as well as watch the video replay. So go to genealogygems.com. You'll see a red join the newsletter button at the top of the homepage, and you can join us that way. And you can always find information below this video. I know it doesn't seem like there's very much information down right below it, but click where it says show more. It's very small, and you'll find links over to our website, directly to the archives of all of these past Elevenses episodes with the show notes. And of course, for you premium members, and I hope that all of you are joining us as premium members, you're going to have a downloadable ad-free version of the show notes, a little cheat sheet for you every single week, so you can make the most out of everything that we talk about on our shows here today. I'm with you. It's just so fun to every week just get a new dose of information that helps us move our family's story along. My family story, it's moving along too. I'm getting older, as Rand said. So thank you so much to all of you for the wonderful birthday wishes in the live chat. We're going to have a wonderful time, go out for dinner tomorrow night. And I'm already in the works putting together next week's show for you. Can't wait to bring it to you. It's going to be fun. So get on that newsletter so you can hear all about it. Okay, great. Everybody's enjoying it. Happy birthday. Thank you, Valerie, everybody. And thank you again to my special guest, Rand Snir from MyHeritage. And those of you who are watching on February 4th, 2021, it's one day only because tomorrow this ends. There is a 50% off special on the complete subscription plan from MyHeritage that you can learn more about on our homepage as well. And that expires tomorrow. We do that every so often, not very often, but it's a wonderful thing. If you haven't tried MyHeritage before, I think you'll love it. Thank you so much, all my friends. I will talk to you next week. Have a wonderful week with all of those that you love. Talk to you soon.